So there's been a sort of culling going on as of late, and it's got a lot of people very upset for frankly understandable reasons. Big entertainment franchises, IPs, universes, whatever you want to call them, are dying, and not because they are becoming irrelevant, but because they are being murdered. The entertainment industry, and Hollywood in particular, has a long-standing tradition of driving IPs into the ground by milking them for sequel after sequel after sequel until eventually their desiccated corpses crumble into dust. This has been happening for a long time, but recently the whole process has taken on an additional dimension that makes it much worse. Politics. Now, I am not one of those people who thinks that artists should keep their political opinions to themselves, right? That's not what art is for, and artists being people, they are entitled to having and expressing their opinions on pretty much anything. And if anything, the entertainment industry has made sure that as little politics as possible is talked by the people they employ anyway. This is why you have actors supporting noble but ultimately uncontroversial causes, things that don't have a high risk of offending the left or the right. Audiences, especially in America, have been historically very quick to be triggered by literally anyone expressing any opinion ever. And while it has been known for a long time that Hollywood is more left-leaning than not, it's been an easy thing to overlook. So even if you're a right-winger and the thing you're watching has the big gay demon in it, that was reason enough to call The Exorcist on your Battlestar Galactica box set. I think that boycotting things because you do not agree with the ideas that the people who created those things hold is stupid. Unless, of course, those things you are boycotting are exclusively vehicles for those people's pet ideas. I consider Dan Harmon to be a lunatic incapable of comprehending the ramifications of the political violence he openly advocates. However, I cannot deny that he is a creative genius who does what he does very well. Me going, oh, I never liked his shows that much anyway, because I found out that he is a foaming at the mouth witch hunter, would be a lie, because I did like his shows and I continue to do so. However, there is nothing that will make art less enjoyable than the artist, or worse, the suits, injecting it with whatever political ideology they prefer, be it because they believe in it, or because they think it is en vogue enough that it will fatten their purses. This is not to say that I dislike political art. Some of the best art ever produced has been political art, and I enjoy it immensely. This is political art, this is political art, and this is political art. But the thing is, if I hadn't told you that these were political art, you wouldn't have known. There is also art where you don't have to be told that it's political because it just explores an idea honestly. Like 1984, it wasn't overtly political, it dealt with relevant issues, and it was very honest in its representation. If you want to bring politics into art, you either need to be very subtle, or you need to have a thing that is extremely well crafted around the central political idea you would like to explore. As you can infer, there are a lot of pitfalls when injecting art with political stuff that will make the art shit. If you have a political ideology injected into a work of art, and that political ideology is just right and correct and good in that fictional world, and all the others are just doo-doo, your political art is shit. You know, like Atlas Shrugged. If you have a character in your work that is only there because of some superficial or minor trait, like their race, or some idea that they believe in, their sexuality, whatever, your political art is shit, and quite frankly also disrespectful. You know, like literally everything that has trans characters in them, where all the interaction you get with that trans character is, oh, look how fucking trans I am. If you make your art political so you can have an excuse to make a cheap money grab and then spin the discussion around it into a political direction, your political art is shit. You know, like all of these anti-white shows that have been floating around recently. Or the new Ghostbusters. If your political art says, hey, this is the ideology that we believe in, and you should believe in it too, because if you don't believe in it, you will be wrong, your political art is shit. You know, like any piece of political art that does not honestly explore the full ramifications of the ideas discussed, and instead resorts to preaching to get its message across. Bad ideas are self-evidently bad, and they will fail if presented against good ideas. Nazi and Soviet propaganda films used to love to do this, by the way. And really the big danger is that if you inject any sort of politics into your art, and it's not perfectly well crafted and perfectly well integrated, people will perceive it as more shit than it actually is, because they will think that it is merely a cheap vehicle for you to drive your political ideology into their living room. That's not what they pay you for, that's not what they expected, that is not what they want. And it's one thing if you do this with a new, entirely original piece of art. I mean, sure, Black Panther is based off a comic book, but from what I hear, the film is actually kind of good. I mean, there is this thing where it gives the alt-right a throbbing erection because it essentially advocates ethno-nationalism, but we can't all be perfect. It's an entirely different thing if you take something that already exists and was apolitical, and you make it political. So let's talk about Star Wars. And as a stand-in, also use Star Wars for every other franchise that the entertainment industry has been running into the ground, because it is as terrified of innovation as it is addicted to always making all the money that is humanly possible. So it's not just about films, it's also about series and video games. I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen The Last Jedi. I saw the one before that, it was alright. It just didn't make me care about the story or the characters enough for me to pay money to see the next one. I mean, sure, the film was visually pleasing, the aesthetic was cool. A lot of the action sequences were pretty well done, and the sound design was on point, but it's Star Wars. But the main character was a boring-ass Mary Sue. The whole plot was copied from the original to such an extent that I was having a constant feeling of déjà vu, and all the cheap political injections, they just made me roll my eyes, because they were worth nothing. And the thing is, they wouldn't have made me roll my eyes if it wasn't for all the people around the film constantly talking about how political it is. If it wasn't for the context of that, I wouldn't even have noticed them. And that is usually a very good sign that the politics in your film are half-assed. Few things in art are worse than throwing in some politics that add or subtract nothing from the plot, because it is completely and utterly disingenuous. Hollywood wants the praise of being on board with all the ideas that they now consider good and proper, but at the same time they are not willing to commit to those ideas enough so that they would essentially become a propaganda department. People don't go to the movies for propaganda. People go to the movies for entertainment. Hollywood wants to do some propaganda, but at the same time is terrified of no longer being entertainment, and rightly so. Audiences are smart enough to see these cheap injections of politics into their beloved and apolitical works of art and fiction, and they do not like it. It would have been bad enough if Disney had just made a bunch more shit flicks that were just a cheap money grab so they could sell more merchandise. A lot of franchises have died from that. But instead of making their own original sci-fi IP, which they could have done, and they could have done anything they wanted with it, it would have failed if they injected politics, but whatever, you know? That would have been their problem. Instead, they took something that already existed, a cultural item, a culture, really. And they made the overwhelming majority of all content produced in that culture moot. The majority of the cultural canon, they just deleted it. They said this is no longer a thing because they didn't respect the culture enough to even read up on the expanded universe. And then they treat the people who have invested time, money, and emotions into that franchise for their entire lives with a degree of callousness that would make strawman comic book villains blush. They have taken something that is part of the identity of millions of people, a culture, a real culture that exists in the world today, and they have bastardized it for their own personal gain, and obviously do not care about it even in the slightest bit, or enough that they would stop exploiting it for money, power, and claps on their back from their millionaire friends. That is massively disrespectful to the culture and personal identity of a lot of people, and you should not be surprised if those people get very, very angry with you. But hold on, Burger, is something that you might say now. This sounds an awful lot like what people say about cultural appropriation. And you are on the record, probably I am on the record, you are on the record saying that cultural appropriation is not bad in any way, shape or form. I have said that, and I stand by it. This is not traditional cultural appropriation. And I'll explain why. If you take something from Japanese culture, right, say sushi, and you made it in a way that some would consider disrespectful or even diametrically opposed to what the original cultural item was about, you have not changed the original cultural item. See, the thing with modern intellectual properties is that people own them. If I made sushi with waffles, I wouldn't change the original real sushi in the Japanese cultural canon. I would make a new form of sushi that had little if nothing to do with that original Japanese invention. If you, however, bastardize an IP that you have bought the rights to by changing the settings or the stories in a way that is disrespectful, you have violated the cultural identity of a great many people. If you culturally appropriate sushi, that's like writing fan fiction of Japanese culture. I don't give a shit what fan fiction you write over IPs that I love, right? Fucking make it as bad or politically charged or hateful or opposed to the original IP as you want. I don't care, it's your fanfiction. You're not changing the cultural canon. If you are given power over something that matters to people on an emotional level as part of their identity, and you then exploit it for your own personal gain, and then have the audacity to mock the people that you have heard, whose culture you have stolen from your ivory tower, you are a disgusting piece of shit human being. Cultural appropriation creates new culture. The Mexicans appropriated tacos al pastor from the Lebanese. The Dutch appropriated chocolate from the Aztecs, which in turn had appropriated chocolate from the Mayans. The Jews culturally appropriated the war deity Yahweh from the Canaanites. And the Romans appropriated their entire pantheon from the Greeks. But exploiting intellectual properties for whatever reason you may have for doing that does the opposite. It destroys culture. It makes people turn away from the things that they loved because they can no longer control what happens to them, and they feel disconnected from the reality of their cultural identity. And if you really believe that this will all pay off, because little girls will see Rey and then love Star Wars to death, I think you're not accounting for the fact that little girls aren't fucking stupid. They can see the fact that your shit is mediocre from a mile away, right? They can see that. Look at the numbers. Look at the sales. These films are all tanking. These games are all tanking. These novels are all tanking. People do not want to see them. People do not want to pay money for them. You cannot own the concept of sushi, but you can own the concept of Star Wars. Take that responsibility seriously and treat it with respect, or watch yourself fail as a consequence of your arrogance and ineptitude. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for watching. Leave your opinions down in the comments. I am genuinely interested as to what you have to say about this. This whole cultural appropriation thing is an idea that just came to me yesterday and I developed it. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, do the whole thing. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Make Support, though to be honest, Make Support is not working at the moment, so if you can use Patreon, I hope Make Support gets its shit together in the future. Join Discord, follow Twitter, follow Twitch. Oh my god, I have to make a list of these. In that spirit, wherever you are and whoever you are, I wish you a fantastic day. And see you around, cunts.